Welcome to another Telltale Books video. By now you probably noticed I'm in different surroundings. I'm actually back at my own house instead of sitting in my mother-in-law's basement doing these, which I have been for the last 2.5 years since spring of 2020. 3.5 years. I've been at my mother-in-law's house because my wife and I have been taking care of her, and then I had a disaster with this house where I had no electricity. The garage was destroyed. The garage is torn down. I haven't built a new one. I do have the electricity restored, so I finally have electric light. I can do videos here again. And I really like to do videos here because, well, I have the whole house to myself now. My wife is still up with my mother-in-law. As soon as I'm done recording, I'm heading back up to Two Rivers there. But this is my house in Sheboygan, and I do like my house. Kind of miss my house, and so I like shooting my videos here. Especially, like I say, I've got the whole place to use for these videos or whatever I want. There's nobody else here. Anyway. Subject of this video, this is going up, being made available to you on YouTube on the day. This video is being made available to you on YouTube on Robert Silverberg's birthday, which is January 15th. Robert Silverberg was born on January 15th, 1935. So he's coming up on 90 years old. He'll be 89 years old this year. Born in New York City, New York, and I'm talking in this video about his fourth work, which is considered to be a whole novel, but it's really not. It's very, very thin. But it wasn't published in magazines and wasn't included in collections with other short works. It was published as a book, intended for the teenage audience, so like a YA book. And it was published by a company called Thomas Y. Kroll, which back in the 50s did specialize just in books for the juvenile audience, for teenagers. And they went to a lot of science fiction authors in the 1950s when space and science fiction and aliens all became very popular and asked for books to be published. Now the deal with Silverberg's, and what I have here, of course, is not the original. This is a paperback. Called a Special Anniversary Edition, Not for Sale, that was published by Warner Books in, I think, 1989. Yeah, April of 1989, Warner Books published this paperback. Otherwise, Scholastic Books published paperbacks of it through the 1960s, and the original, published by Thomas Y. Kroll, was published in 1955 in hardback. So it's not exactly an easy book to get a hold of. I really love this, even though this was the cheapest edition for me to get. I think it's the most beautiful. I love the cover illustration. Way cooler than the original Thomas Kroll. Although I have seen the hardcover from Thomas Kroll for sale on the internet. So you can get it if you want. Anyway, how this came about. There's an introduction in here where Robert Silverberg talks about how this book happened and how he got to publish a novel so early in his career. Because he was still a teenager in 1955. Okay, he was approaching 20 years old at the time. He was actually more like 18 at the time when he started talking to Thomas Kroll. Kroll was sending out arcs to people who they knew were knowledgeable about science fiction, fantasy. Silverberg being one of them. He was prominent in fandom. So they sent him an advanced copy of this book and asked him to critique it, and he ripped the crap out of it and sent his review back. And they were so impressed by his knowledge of science fiction that they came back to him and said, "How would you like to write a book for us?" And so he agreed. And of course, he went through like 3 rounds on this book before he got it to be something publishable. The first drafts were just not very good. And then he finally did what became Revolt on Alpha C. And Thomas Kroll finally loved it and published that. Basic plot. It's a space cadet training mission. You have interstellar travel. Earth has established colonies on planets around other stars, prominently the 4th planet of Alpha Centauri, so Alpha C. And so cadet named Larry, he's on a training mission. He's their radio operator. Not really radio, but communications operator back to Earth over interstellar distances. And they have a warp drive that folds space so that they can get to Alpha Centauri in like a week. I think it's a week, or is it a month? I forget. But not 5 years, okay, which is how long it would take at the speed of light. So they go on this training mission. They go to Alpha Centauri C, or Alpha Centauri 4, I mean. And they try to contact to get permission to land at a city called New London. And they can't raise anybody. They finally do get in touch with New London and are told they're not allowing people to land. What's happened is there's been kind of a rebellion. There are 4 different cities, small cities on Alpha Centauri 4. 3 of them have fallen under the control of rebels that want their independence from Earth because they feel they're being unfairly taxed. They feel they're being taxed without representation. This is starting to sound familiar, right? And the characters in the book actually do bring that up, that, well, the American Revolution was all about establishing freedom from England from being taxed without representation. And they had to go to war to get it. And the same is happening here. They want their freedom as separate worlds. They want to be represented on the councils and have a voice in what happens to them. And they're demanding it, and they're willing to go to war to get it. So Larry gets into the middle of all this, and the adventures begin. It's a young adult novel. It's Robert Silverberg's very first novel. It's really only a novella as far as the actual length. I mean, look at how thin this book is. It's not a novel. It's 82 pages in this paperback. Okay, shorter than The Time Machine. But it's not a great novel, but as a young adult science fiction adventure, Silverberg does a great job bringing out the issues about the American Revolution, bringing out the issues about a character who sets out as a cadet. He's sworn to follow the orders of his leaders, who are on the side of the Earth government. And he believes in that. And when he first learns that these people are trying to rebel, he's thinking, no, they should get in line. They should just do what they're being told. But the more he talks to the more he gets involved in events, the more he is exposed to the rebels, the more he talks to the rebels, the more he realizes that they're right. Earth should let them have a say in what happens to them. And so he slowly comes around to seeing that it was right for the United States to fight for its independence, and it's right for Alpha Centauri 4 to fight for its independence, especially at so great a distance. Yes, maybe they have the technology to get there in a week, but it's a huge, huge distance. There's no way that a government could successfully maintain control over such a distant colony. And so they really should just let them have their representation and get them into, get them as members of the Earth Council government and have a seat on the council government. That's not such a big deal, is it? Make it easier to manage them. So I was actually kind of impressed with this. I was expecting an amateur work. I was expecting just a standard space opera. I was expecting something that wasn't anywhere near as good as other science fiction stories of the day. And I found something that for 1955 is better than a lot of what was professionally written by seasoned writers. This was an enjoyable book. It was a good book, especially as a young adult book. You don't expect The Demolished Man from a young adult book, or from a writer who had never written a book before, and this is only his fourth published work. You don't expect something at the level of The Demolished Man or Tiger. That you expect something a lot less. And what I expected was actually a lot less than what I got. And it's pretty clear from this where Robert's, obviously today we know where Robert Silverberg ultimately was going to end up, what kinds of great things he was going to write. But back in 1955, nobody did. But if you read this book, Revolt on Alpha C at that time, I think you could see that this is a guy who's going to be at least a very good science fiction adventure writer, as good as any of the others that were writing space operas in 1955. So I would recommend this. If you like science fiction adventure, try and track this book down. Try and track a copy of this down and read it. I think it's worth your time. It's a really good book. Not a top tale, but it's very good. And I would recommend it to anybody that likes science fiction adventure. And so, have you read Revolt on Alpha C? Do you have any other thoughts about early Robert Silverberg? Leave them in the comments, please. I really want to hear what you have to say about things. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come on back for a lot more Robert Silverberg. His next one will be a short story called The Martian. And I'm going to be here doing that and a lot more.